tried snowboarding, Mark Heingartner brought a board to high school in 1982 or 83, and I didn't think it was much fun at all. But I've been proudly standing sideways since 1991 on a Burton Snowboard, and I'm not going back. So this is a real thrill for me. My name is Dave Bradbury. I'm president of the Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies, or VCET. We provide mentoring, innovation and co-working spaces and venture capital to companies across Vermont. On behalf of Hotel Vermont, its owners and its leadership team, Hans Van Wees is somewhere in the back, and Lawrence Sanderson, RETN, our media partner for statewide distribution of this event, which will be taped, and my partner, Sam Roach-Gerber at VCET. We really are thrilled to have you all here and kick off season 2 of our Female Foundries. Did I not say your name right?
No, you nailed it.
Nailed it. Woo! Let's start with a quick survey. I'd like to see who's here and maybe help the panel sort of figure it out a little bit. Who skied or snowboarded today? Yeah. Awesome. It was April conditions today. All right, who's a goofy foot like me? Nice. All right, you people, drinks are on me. Who's an actual entrepreneur or aspiring to be? Raise your hands, please.
Yeah.
Look around the room there. Okay. Thank you for doing that. Any college students here? High school students? Yeah. Taylor, you don't count. All right, we got a couple. Thank you for coming. How about angel investors?
Always
brave people. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Raise your hand if you came last year and now you started a yoga business for companies. Yeah. All right. Flyway yoga. We love that. All right. Raise your hand if you came last year, you sold your award-winning goat cheese company. Allison Hooper is here. That's awesome. Sam, her son Sam, thank you. I haven't seen her yet, but raise your hand, Corinne, if you're here, and if you're on the Forbes 30 under 30 total badass entrepreneur list. Is Corinne here? Maybe let's just clap for her anyway. Her company is Skida, which makes great activewear for our heads and necks. Also, I'm not sure, I haven't seen him yet, but raise your hand if you're married to the CEO at Burton Snowboards.
No, he's always late.
He's always late. Maybe we can edit Jake's hand in later.
Why you gotta call Mom like that?
Perfect. These glasses are for looks. I really can't see much. So.
You'll be there. You'll be there.
All right. Why did we start this? We started the series to call attention to Vermont's amazing female founders and encourage more women to start businesses by demystifying the entrepreneurial journey, offering mentorship, in some cases funding, and making available resources from a host of entities and individuals around our state. Why is this important? Entrepreneurship is Vermont's business model. And as far as we can tell, it's the best near-term remedy to address income and wealth inequality. Women-founded and led companies have massive potential to start, grow, and thrive here in Vermont. We've got the mom of our founders up here in the front. They're living the dream, right? Mostly, right? There you go. Just to recap quickly, season 1. Again, we had 6 events. We had 13 fantastic leaders and risk takers. Raised $5,000 for various local charities. Over 400 people attended. About that number watched it online, which is amazing. And RETN distributes to about 40,000 Vermont households through public access. So it has reach and impact. People can digest this today, tomorrow, or in years to come. So we thank you for that, RETN. Season 2, we're going to kick off with building a global brand in Vermont with 5 leaders from Burton, including co-founder and current CEO Donna Carpenter. And we hope the Female Founders Series inspires this next generation of entrepreneurs. It helps connect the active entrepreneurs today with the people and resources to help you get maybe a little bit of an advantage forward, figuring it out faster, quicker, cheaper, better. And this year, your tickets fees, 100% of the proceeds this season are going to benefit the Vermont Works for Women, and which is awesome. And I think, I haven't seen her, but the chair, Carolyn Cook, if Yes, you are here. Come on up and do a quick intro, and then we'll get to the good stuff.
Great. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. I'm very excited to be here on behalf of Vermont Works for Women, and as a female founder myself, I was a co-founder of a small, compared to Burton, tiny little outdoor women's clothing company called ISIS. It's exciting to be able to tie together, my personal passion of founding and being an entrepreneur with an organization that I'm really passionate about. So we're very excited to be part of the series. As Vermont Works for Women, we are all about empowering women and about the power of work to help create a better future and better paths for women. And if women are working and women are happy, communities are healthier and we're all healthier. So we're really excited, and I really look forward to hearing what these guys have to say. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave and Carolyn. That was a great intro. I will keep mine super short so we can get to the good stuff here. If I totally screw up, it's because I was wearing my lucky Burton hoodie and I got too hot, had to take it off. So that's my bad. Also, my phone is out. It's not because my mom's texting me. It's to keep track of time. So I'm Sam Roach-Gerber. I'm the Director of Innovation at VCET, and I'm going to be moderating this evening, or more realistically, just hanging out with these awesome ladies. Again, before we start, thank you to Hotel Vermont, our co-sponsor, RETN, and of course, Vermont Works for Women. So I've always loved Burton's products, even I had spent 25 years of my life never having been on a mountain before. Taught myself how to ski 2 years ago, and snowboarding is up next. So, and I loved the company just because they have awesome products, but I had no idea how deep the awesomeness really went. That was until probably 6 months or so ago when Dave and I had the pleasure of interviewing Donna for our podcast, Start Here. And I learned so much from Donna and her journey and the story of Burton, and hopefully we'll get a little bit deeper into that tonight. But just to give you guys sort of an impression of what's beyond these awesome products that we use pretty much every day here in Vermont, here's a few fun facts that I sort of stumbled upon. Since it started 36 years ago, the Burton U.S. Open Snowboarding Championships has awarded equal prize money to men and women. My personal favorite, Burton covered employees' costs to attend the Women's March on Washington in January 2017. They have an unbelievable generous maternity and paternity policy, which includes allowing for a caregiver to travel with new moms and dads on business trips for the first 18 months of their children's lives. And perhaps most importantly, 45% of Burton's leadership team is female. So to spare you all, instead of me doing really long LinkedIn introductions, we're going to have Donna introduce herself and her team.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm going to start, I guess, right here on my right. Anne-Marie started how many years ago?
18 maybe?
18 years ago.
I was 3. Obviously.
And when I started the Women's Leadership Initiative 14 years ago, and I had that oh shit moment of we are behind the curve, less than 10% of our leadership are female, we're in trouble, we need to do something about it. Anne-Marie joined me very on in that journey. She's been on the WLI committee for 14 years. It's been in existence for 14 years.
Did you carry her in a baby Bjorn when she first started?
Exactly.
Nice.
And she's always been I'm not a marketing person, never trust me with a marketing decision. She's always been my go-to. So I think there was a point when you transitioned from product to marketing. Anne-Marie was one of those people who came to us with more experience than we realized. And she had started in a lower product, worked her way up, and then when PR came open, I think I stepped in at that point and advocated, and then I got out of her way. And she went from global director of PR to vice president of brand marketing to senior vice president of marketing to now our chief marketing officer. So it's been incredible to watch her grow and take charge. And then we've got Josee, another long timer. It's been 20 years, though. A couple of them ran away from home and came back. Josee ran away from home and came back, but we'll count it as 20 years. And I think the most amazing thing about Josee is that she worked for us. We were, late 90s, we were like, oh shit, manufacturing is starting to move to Asia. We need to set up Asian operations. Let's send Josee. And then we had a big project in Europe. And every single time Josee raised her hand and said, I will go set up distribution in China, I will go set up these new brands in Europe. And each time, now we'll guarantee somebody a job. Like if we'll say, hey, we need to do a 2-year assignment in Europe for us, and we guarantee that they'll have a job. Back then, she had no guarantee.
She didn't know that.
She did know that. She did know that. And so since then, she's also had a career where she took over operations. And then we said, oh, you did good with that. Let's give you all of IT. Okay, you did good with that. How about direct to consumer? Like, where did that come from? But anyway, at every stage, she's stepped up. And although Josee was not involved directly in the WLI, I need to say something about her because when I started 14 years ago, young women said to me, yeah, you can do all these great policies or whatever, but I don't see any role models. I don't see any women running your company and making strategic decisions who are balancing family and their career. And so Josee, every once in a while.
I got pregnant for you.
Took one for the team.
Every once in a while, she would come to me and say, do you want me doing more for the WL? And I just said, Josee, just be you. Just be you and keep rising and, be that role model. So thank you for that. We now have Beth Steele, Vice President of National Sales. This is like important sales. This is like REI and, those little things, Amazon.
You may have heard of them.
You may have heard of them. And she's another one who ran away from home. I think she grew up with Burton and sales. I mean, you don't see a lot of women in sales. It's a very, very tough job. I mean, the travel and the bro-downs and the whatever you're dealing with. But this woman loves sales, and she bleeds Burton, and she's one of the few people that I literally got down on my knees and prostrated myself in a public place and said, will you come back? And she did. Thank you. And last but not least, Elysa Walk. And Elysa's different in that she has joined us more recently as the general manager of North America, a very big job. And one of the things I'm most proud of is to be able to take an incredibly talented senior manager from another company. I still have people coming up to me at every trade show I go to and say, how did you get her? How did you get her? We all tried. How did you get her? And I'm very proud that we were able to integrate her into the senior team, and she has a real voice and a real point of view. And she was general manager of Giant Bicycle and turned them around. And also started a women's brand for them, really realized. We had actually met at a women's conference a couple years before talking about marketing to women, and she had done an amazing job there. So this is my posse, and I'm really lucky. And they've all had different paths, but they've all been very courageous in terms of, action sports is a male-dominated world. It's hard sometimes to get your opinions across and make your mark. And I tend to think of my job as clearing their path and then getting out of the way.
Awesome. So they know a thing or two about a thing or two, is to sum that up, right?
Yeah.
So Donna, I just want to start with you. You, in the podcast that you guys should all check out, vcet.co/podcast, iTunes and SoundCloud, you describe yourself as an accidental entrepreneur. Can you tell us a little bit about your career at Burton and how you became CEO?
Yeah, wow.
Just sum it up, a couple minutes or so.
That was a long journey. Yeah, I met Jake in a bar on New Year's Eve, and I was from New York, and I was going to there he is, he was late. We all knew you were going to be late, so you might as well stand up
Bradbury
and
already
wait.
called you out.
You might as well.
What time did the lift close?
So it's funny, right after I met Jake, I was living in New York, and I fell head over heels with this guy making like these wood boards in his barn. And next thing I knew, I was living in Vermont, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And he had the idea to make a snowboard like a ski. And the only place that was done was in the Alps at the time, production of ski production. So he said, so I actually ended up getting another job with a educational organization in Austria. He was going to go look at production. And while we were waiting to go, he said, hey, could you look at these inquiries of people who were asking about snowboarding and wanting snowboards, and we were shipping snowboards to in Europe. And the next thing I knew, I was 22 years old, just out of college. And I was setting up a European operation. Sounds sexy. It was. But, I guess what happened from the beginning was it was bigger than us. It was about the demand for snowboarding. People wanted to try it. We were told, hey, things were growing very well in the U.S., and they were like, it'll never take off in Europe because people are so traditionally tied to skiing in the Alps and blah, blah, blah. And it was the exact opposite. They were looking for something new. So, again, I think it was bigger than us. It was about the sport. It was about the rider. How could we make this the best possible experience? It's why we started to produce clothing, not because we thought ski clothing was ugly, which we did, and still call it outdoor. But we needed something that moved in our upper body.
Yeah.
So nobody was producing stuff for us. So we started doing that. And I think that it's really just a testament to how fun the sport is, how it grew so quickly.
Yeah. So how long have you been CEO? A couple of years?
So I after I came back from Europe, I really came back to have my kids here in the States. And what we needed at the time was finance, so I became the chief financial officer. I did take some time off to raise my kids a few years, and then I came back in to run the Women's Leadership Initiative and help with women's marketing. During the economic crash, we realized that we had to step back in as leaders. So Jake stepped back in as CEO, and I stepped back in as Senior Vice President of International. I had run Europe, but then I was put in charge of Asia and Europe, which was a great experience. And, I often tell people, I never envisioned the next role. Jake is the one who actually says to me, like, you should be president now. And then when I was president, he was like, you should be CEO now. And I was like, no. Like, I'm not ready for that. And it's funny. I think that's kind of typical of women saying, I'll give you 5 reasons why I'm not ready. But it's funny. He's the one who pushed me and said, no, you can lead this company. And I'll take a step back and go snowboarding in Switzerland with my buddies. And we're all good.
There it is.
No, he's really focused on product, and we just launched Step On, and that was really his baby, and so it allows him to focus on product and on the image of the brand, and I can focus on the rest of the shit.
Awesome. You made it like, what, 7 minutes into it?
Too long.
Swear words.
Oh, without dropping them.
You're forgiven. Speaking of Jake, I believe he was the one that noticed that there were only 3 women in the room at this global directors meeting in 2003. Can you talk about that as a catalyst for change and sort of a wake-up call for the organization?
Yeah, I think it really was this oh shit moment of Jake's, and he was in a meeting of 25 global directors, and there were 2 or 3 women in the room, and he said, oh my God, we're creating a culture that we didn't mean to, and we are never going to be innovative with a lack of diversity. I think he knew at a gut level. I don't know that he could have articulated that at the time, but I think he knew at a gut level, you're not attracting the best talent if you're only pulling from half the population, and you're not being innovative, and we were going to be in trouble. So he really, and I think what happened was we, in the very beginning, we were very diverse. I remember our first head of marketing was a woman, our first head of product was a woman. But then as we grew quickly, I talked about that rapid growth, we were pulling both employees and participants from surf, skate, and ski, which were all very male-dominated. And so all of a sudden, we're like, oh, shit, we don't want this. And I think originally I was just going to look at how we recruited, retained, and promoted women, but then I also started thinking, hey, we got to talk about how we invite women into this community. So it's both internal and external. And I don't think you can talk about the external and really reach the women's market unless you have women who are there deciding what's cool for women and what's core for women, not letting men make that decision.
Totally. So Elysa, you're sort of the newcomer here. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about like what it's like to walk into a company like Burton? Like it seems to be such a family. It has such a unique culture. I think most people are aware of the Burton stance is just such a cool sort of motto to live by. Just talk a little bit about what that was like.
It took a little bit of getting used to that there wasn't, these corporate objectives and strategies. There is a trail map that described where we're going. There wasn't a mission statement and values. There is the stance, in terms of what Burton stands for. So there was definitely a lot to get used to, but working for a privately held company where I know every decision I was making was on behalf of Donna or on behalf of Jake, it makes it personal and real, and I think it really shapes how you make decisions when it's a privately held company. And I did come from an organization that was publicly traded. It was an Asian company. It was massive and blah, blah, blah. And it's different. Being in Vermont also, the Vermont culture is extremely friendly and warm. And I think you don't see that in a lot of other companies that are based elsewhere.
Awesome. And the rest of you have had sort of successive roles at Burton. Obviously, you've experienced so many levels of growth and change in the company. How has the culture sort of shifted since you started? Any of you could jump in.
I could jump in. I don't know if the culture has shifted. I think Burton, what's so unique about Burton is it's a really, like, you raise your hand kind of a culture. So those people that feel really comfortable kind of pushing themselves through, I think tend to have a lot of success. I was pretty fortunate, again, being a woman and being in sales. When I started, I worked for a sales rep, all men, but they were very conscious of, they were the right men. And they were very conscious of kind of bringing Donna's values and Jake's values into, when you have a woman selling, you're going to get better sales. Like, it was just very obvious that you're going to get better, higher sales. We just have something that's very unique and different. So I don't know if the culture has changed. I think it's just kind of expanded and, kind of gotten even more enforced. I don't see a lot of difference in the last 20 years.
I would just add that I think it's become a lot more family friendly, obviously, because we have all grown up there and we've had families, and all of a sudden the product for kids is so much better. The sales for our youth product is going up. It's all obvious, right? So there's the WLI that has contributed to that, but also just the culture. Like when you're around more family people and more kids, it all comes together, and we've been able to really nurture that environment. So it's been great.
And I have to say something, like, I remember when I started this project, I was going to look at how we recruited women, how we retained them, how we advanced them, and the culture. And what I realized very quickly was you can't just address culture from the top. And culture wasn't going to change until there were more women in the room, period. It's that simple. And I did a lot of research, and they say that a third of leadership is the tipping point, where women no longer are the token woman who's going along with the opinion of the guys because that's what she's supposed to do, and we're all kind of pressured into doing. Once you have a third of the people in the room are women, then the perspective changes. And so I knew I actually eliminated culture and added family, maternity, post-maternity, flex time, those kind of things as another category, and drop culture, because I said nobody's going to dictate culture from the top. It's just got to be amazing women in the room that change it.
Awesome. Anne-Marie, what are your thoughts?
You know what, for me, because I've been around for a few years, what was amazing is, I don't think it's shifted, but the pillars have stayed the same, but I think what Jake and Donna have done an amazing job of is they've continued to build on top of it. So it's always been about that we have this amazing, unique sport, right? Because snowboarding was something so cool and so different, and this sense of pioneering all the time. But then I think what some people didn't understand, it also had a lifestyle from day one. I mean, music, culture, fashion, design, streetwear, a global presence. So that has been there from the beginning. And these guys are so, so well traveled. And they were, like Donna said, they had built a base in Europe from the get. And then this entrepreneurial sense on top of that, because we had to fight for everything we went for. So that hasn't changed. We still have that in us. We love our sport, but we love the lifestyle that we've built around that, which is very, very authentic. And we love the challenge of what we get after. So that, I think those are the pillars of the culture. But what I've seen over the years is that these guys have done an amazing job of building on top of it, and then also starting to amplify it. We've never really shared that that's our culture. We've just been lucky enough to live it. So now we're telling that story a little bit more because it's exciting. We have almost 1,000 employees globally, and they all share this. So we're starting to sort of tell our story and sort of open the curtain behind the brand, and it's very, very cool.
Awesome. And what advice do you guys have for entrepreneurs starting businesses to ensure that a culture that they care about kind of lasts through the growth and the scaling?
Yeah, I mean, I would say be mindful of it, just sort of realize what is happening in your culture. And one thing that I found very effective is talking to the employees. When I started, I interviewed probably 60 former and current employees, men and women, and I said, what are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And I said, this is totally confidential. Your name is not going to be put on this. And I think they really trusted me. And I remember the other senior managers were like, oh, you're just going to get a bitch session. They're just going to complain about this and that, and they don't have enough of this. And it was the exact opposite. They cared about Burton, and they cared about where Burton was going, and they wanted to see it succeed. And they understood that we were growing up, that we were all having children and, wanting to be seen as not just employees, but as humans with families and everything else. So, yeah.
Do you guys have thoughts?
I would say just keeping your culture dynamic. If I think about Burton, I've had other jobs that have kind of got me to where I am today. But Burton has such a dynamic culture, and I mean that, kind of every facet. You just never stop moving, and you really do kind of go through your day feeling, even if it's a hard day, there is this feeling of inspiration where, like, you just don't know what's going to happen in your next meeting, and there is a real sense of collaboration. And when you don't have that at a job, it's so obvious when you have collaboration and you don't, there is such a difference. So I would say keep it collaborative, keep it moving, keep it dynamic, and I think those are, kind of pillars of success.
Can you guys talk a little bit about new hires and how you sort of incorporate them into this massive cultural sort of amazing conglomerate of people?
Oh, we throw them in and see if they can swim. Elysa can swim.
Yeah, well, I guess I can swim, yeah. My new hire process was amazing. I remember my first 2 weeks just being thrown into all these informational sessions with virtually the entire company. And it was drinking from a fire hose. I think I remembered maybe, 25% of everything that I heard, but I met almost all of the colleagues that I would then be later working with, and I just got to take in what the company was all about. And people really cared too. So they went the extra mile to prepare these presentations for me on what they are working on and what they're doing. And they didn't have to do that, but they cared. So it is just a culture, kind of echoing what Donna was saying, that, it is a very mindful culture where people do genuinely try to help each other. And I think that's just really a testament to what you guys have brought to it.
And you can't communicate enough. I mean, I remember when I came back in a leadership role in 2009, I realized that the only time we had a company meeting was to share bad news. So it was like, company meeting, and everybody's like, oh no, what's going to happen? So I started having 2 a year, and then I heard back, they want more. I'm like, they want more than 2 a year? Okay, we'll do 4 a year, and I think that's been part of the collaborative success, is really communicating. And you sit around in these senior meetings and you think, oh yeah, they should know why we made that decision. They don't. And so I think that as leaders that we've all been tasked with communication as part of our jobs.
Did you have something to add to that, Anne Marie?
No, I agree with Donna. I mean, as sort of communications is sort of my jam, but
That's what I figured. I figured
what
that.
you learn,
Inspires me on it.
what you learn now is you can't do it enough. And I think just this, I mean, I hate to overuse the word transparency, but that is a big word that we are learning over the last, just few years, of you can't share enough of what did happen in that meeting and what is going on. And I think Elysa alluded to this trail map that we created, which is our way of showing what our path forward is, but in a very cool and very authentic way. I think that's something Jake has always taught us. Like, we never wanted that mission statement so much, but we wanted that very visual, very visceral feel of what everyone could get after. And I think that's what we've done a very good job of, is showing our direction, staying true to it, and making sure everyone feels involved with that.
Very cool. And Josee, it sounds like you've done a lot of international work. Can you talk a little bit about what that's like going, to different continents with the same company?
Well, there was definitely always a family over there. Some families are different everywhere, and certainly Asia is completely different than Europe. Some of our European women are in the room, which is really nice to see you guys over there. But I think there's no doubt about it that being a woman in America in the workplace is the best place to be. And then the other places are definitely more difficult, and you have to be, I've definitely had to be aware of the expectations of a woman, but also not be afraid to be, forthright and, clear with what you're trying to accomplish at all times. But it's, we can be pretty happy that we're here in America. This is the best place in the world to be a woman in the workplace, for sure.
Awesome. Can someone talk a little bit about some of the sort of specific tactics put in place by the Women's Leadership Initiative, and just a little bit more detail about what that is and how it got started and what you guys are doing with it?
Yeah, I can start. So really, we look at those 3 things: recruiting, retention, advancement. So, when we started, we realized that when we put out a job for a leader, we were getting 98% male resumes. So what we did was we made it so that if you're hiring for a leader, you have to have a female in the finalist as a final candidate. So that means, as a hiring manager, if you don't have one, you've got to go out and find a woman who's very qualified. We did things like we would buddy up women who were applying for a job with a woman who worked at Burton to get like kind of the real scoop on it. Then we did a lot of things around training and development. And what's interesting was, like I said, we were under 10% when we started in 2003, and we're now at 42%. And we feel like we really, I'm going to retire when we're 51% of leadership, 51% of sales, and 51% of participation in snowboarding. So that's when I can retire. So hopefully it's in just a couple years. But what we really
No pressure.
what we realized recently as part of the group was, hey, you know what? We've achieved a certain level of diversity. I was just in Japan, and like Josee said, you know, no woman in Japan normally would work after having a child. Mothers don't work. It's starting to change because they need the workers. 6% of Japanese leadership is female in companies, and the new prime minister has a goal to get to 30% by 2030. And I asked them to run the numbers for us for Japan, and we are at 30. And and we have seven working mothers working for us, and including our HR director, who's just had her second child. So it's very unusual. So, you know, this is really a global effort, and what we realized was, hey, we should be out talking about it now. Like, we put our head down and we worked, and it is hard work. And, you know, what Elysa said about a private company, that's what allows you to do it. We're like, come hell or high water, we are changing these numbers. You know, I think in big corporations, the diversity program is the first to be cut for budgets or whatever, and we just stayed committed to it. So now we really are trying to kind of leverage it, and kind of we're doing some consumer insights on our female customer. We're trying to get more PR around these incredible women that we have, and leverage it for the first time.
What I found coming from another industry, I was a high-ranking female. I was the only one at the table on the senior team of 25 people. I was on 2 boards. I was the only female on both of those boards. By the time I left, there was one other female. And being a female, it was a thing. Like, they started talking about women's products, and all of a sudden they all look at me as if I have the answer to represent every female across the world. And in some cases, I felt really wanted, because they were like, oh, thank God we could finally check the box. We have a female in the room. But in other ways, it was always a thing. It was something I had to be aware of. I was like carrying the weight of all the women in this table. And it was an honor, but it was work. Coming into Burton, it's not a thing. I'm a leader. I get to focus on my job and not sit here and have to carry the weight of, you know, representing other females, because we're here, we're working, we're focused on our job and just being the best that we can be. So I think paving that way has made a much more productive company and culture than, you know, these other companies that just don't see it.
I also think one of the things you said to me when you came on was that what you liked was that you saw women in non-traditional female roles, the head of operations and IT, the head of marketing, and our head of HR and the head of our nonprofit foundation are dudes. So, you know, you usually get the token HR senior manager in the room or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's not like that at Burton.
Any other specific tactics that you guys have seen really pay off?
From women's leadership?
Yeah.
I'd say one of the biggest ones that came out of it was a mentoring
Yes.
program.
Yes.
That was something that we really didn't have, or if it happened, it was very, I don't know, quiet or organic. And we realized that as these women come on board, the best thing to do is partner them up with other women. So it was women mentoring women. And that was extremely successful. It was just whatever that mentoring could be. Again, we're very informal, so it wasn't sort of like sign at the dotted line and get through this, you know, page of HR requirements. It was like, hey, let's hang out or grab lunch or go take runs. and just talk about like how to better onboard or how to feel part of it. So I think that mentoring was so successful that what happened was a lot of the men started to ask like, well, hey, how does a guy go about getting a mentor? So Donna was like, hey, that was the first thing that WLI did that then got transitioned over to the men. So there was a few programs that came out of a real need for the women, but then kind of naturally extended. So
Yeah,
that was
I think
important.
if you had asked, would Burton be a mentoring culture? They, 20 years ago, people would say, "Yeah, out of your mind." No, but we did because of the Women's Leadership Initiative. And after sort of being concerned about maternity and post-maternity, that's what women told me they craved the most. Was a mentor, and they saw it happen very organically with guys, and they needed to be more proactive. So I would say that was one of the huge keys to our success.
So are you guys all mentors to younger women at Burton? Yes. Awesome. So a couple follow-up questions to that. What scares you most about what you're hearing from these younger women, and what excites you most?
That's good stories.
I would say there are times where I have a couple of mentees, and I have had mentees leave. And there is that moment when you're mentoring a woman and you realize that her time is, that you can't mentor her to lean in, that you're almost in a position of mentoring her to lean away. And that can be a little scary because you're like, how do I play this? And if it's somebody really valuable, that can be, challenging. And then I think the more exhilarating part of it is getting to know someone at a deeper level and then figuring out that they really have that magic potential and then helping them connect the dots for their next step. So that's definitely, I've been lucky enough to have both of those scenarios, and it's pretty cool when it happens that they get promoted.
I think I would just add the same thing we all hear. It's become so commonplace. Like, women are so concerned they don't have all the qualifications for the next step, or they're not sure what the next step could be for them. And our job is just to say you're never 100% ready. You just have to count on your intuition, your ability to work hard, learn new things, be curious, and that
Like
is
having a baby. You're
the
never
best
ready.
advice. You'll never
Never
be a
ready.
pro till you're a pro, and you got to just learn somewhere. So that I still hear that a lot. Like, I'm not ready. Should I go back to school? What do I need to learn? It's like, you can do this.
Another thing the WLI did pretty recently was expand the borders for our mentor program. So I'm actually now mentoring someone in Japan. And that is really scary, because my first conversation with her, I said, girl, I'm not going to have all the answers. But I could listen. I could be a good sounding board. But, that's a little nerve-wracking, too, because I'm not in that organization as much. But it's made a powerful connection for us.
You're gonna say something,
I was
Beth?
just going to add that, not only do we have the mentoring, like, official, but I would say, like, look at these women. We have a natural mentoring culture. So every step of the way, there is an opportunity to talk with people on this side and say, like, hey, is your door open? Can I come in and really, like, I have something to bounce off you? And there is that natural feeling of, with this group of leaders and the leaders that are back at Burton, that you do have that ability to bounce ideas and get some mentoring.
I can attest to that, for sure.
Exactly.
So as I mentioned earlier, you guys went from 10% of leadership to 45 being women, which is incredible. It sounds like maybe mentorship has had a big impact on that. Anne-Marie, can you talk a little bit? You've totally climbed the ranks. Can you talk a little bit about, whether that was you pushing yourself for mentorship, or sort of how that works?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think kind of a combination of everything. I think what Jake and Donna have done is really taught us that sense of, like, act like an owner, like, think like an entrepreneur. Don't kind of come in and wait for the perfect guidelines of, like, this is how you do your job, like page 3, how to handle this issue. So when you understand it, exactly. And then we also talk a lot about fit, like, just kind of understanding, like, intrinsically the culture and how we do things. It's a very unique and very dynamic environment. So I think when you can understand that, then you can start sort of seeing a path forward. And also what is amazing about Burton is it's ever changing. We never sit still. We're always evolving. So I always say I've never had the same year twice. It isn't that sense like, oh, every day I just sort of grind out the same things. It's not that way. So you start to see as initiatives come up, you see a path, ooh, they're probably going to want to make some moves there. And if you're ambitious, but you also get it, and you can bring your talent and skill and kind of, as Josee was saying, sort of your guts to it, they're very open to kind of opening that path. So you need some mentorship along the way to make sure you're not overstepping, or does that role feel right for me? But I think what they've really done an amazing job with is rewarding courage and rewarding that, as Beth said, that raise your hand, like, we're opening 25 flagship stores, like, I want to lead that. That sounds incredible, and here's why I can, and sounds good. So it's a combination of sort of guts and grit and using your expertise, but also using your advisors to make sure you're kind of on the right path.
Yeah, there never was a roadmap for us. And even now, I mean, I don't think you can name a company that's doing hard goods and soft goods. I mean, maybe they say they used to make climbing stuff. But they don't do it anymore. So, we are still pioneering in a way. So we do need these sort of entrepreneurial, spirited people.
And beyond just mentorship, how can women advocate for each other?
I mean, the way I describe it is it's sometimes much easier to talk to somebody who's like you or who's been through the same things, and just having more of those people around makes it easier to talk about your career or where you want to go or what you need to learn, or things you can avoid in your career path. So I think it's simply having somebody who's relatable to you.
I'd also add to Josee, holding a high standard. So what we don't do, or what I don't do, is because you're a woman. I think it's we all have to kind of meet at a certain level, and in this culture, it's very, Anne-Marie, I think, spoke to it really well. There's that grit and determination and some of the qualities that make a great leader at Burton, but it's pushing each other to really have that high standard, and then those doors kind of open, from that angle. But it's rare, I think, that you come at it from the, because you're a woman, let's get this going. It kind of comes from, well, let's see what you can bring and what you can do, and then we're just gonna kind of push this forward, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think we're going to open it up to the audience so you guys can have a chance to ask some questions. Do we have a mic to pass around? Yes. We'll see, Jake. Who has questions for these women, either generally or specifically individually?
Nice fleece, by the way.
Yeah.
First off, thank you guys so much. I don't know if this is on.
It is recording now.
Okay, cool. I was wondering, you guys started to speak about our female customer, and I was wondering if you guys could give more details on that and how it might differ from another brand.
Well, I mean, I think, first of all, like Sam was saying in the beginning, we've been dedicated to women from the beginning and women's athletes. We had equal prize money from the beginning. We've always supported athletes. We were the first ones to have specific product, board boot binding for women. So I think that really we just see it as a continuation of who we've always been. And I think there was that oh shit moment 13, 14 years ago when I realized, if we don't have many women working in the company, how are we inviting women into the sport? Are we making them feel like they are part of? They were always part of. And what I realized was, no, we weren't. They didn't necessarily relate to the guy jumping 40 feet off. They turned the page and say, that's not me. It wasn't what was inspiring them, and we were pinking and shrinking our clothing. I will admit, we were taking the men's jacket, turning it pink, making it short, and saying, "Why aren't you buying that?" So, I think that it was an evolution for us. I think we were always committed to it, but then we really realized, like I said, that we had to have women internally making strategic marketing, product sales decisions for us to really be able to reach that female consumer.
Yeah, what I would add to that is I think what women also did was push us on the lifestyle front, because what we realized was, yes, we have these passionate riders and they love our gear and they love our sport, but there's so much more to them that they identify with. So we created a website called burtongirls.com. Shameless plug. And really that was the first foray where we felt comfortable to say, yeah, let's talk about the sport and let's talk about the product, but let's talk about what else. What's their training regime? What's their nutrition regime? What are they doing after dark? I mean, so it was I feel like women gave us the confidence to speak about a wider version of the brand and the lifestyle of the brand and what else defined the brand. So in that sense, I think we're very thankful that they kind of helped us become more confident to talk about who we were off the mountain as well. So now, of course, we do that for men as well, so.
Hi. I grew up
Hi.
in Vermont and identified very thoroughly with the Burton brand in high school. I'm pretty sure I had the 1996 catalog hard goods memorized, all of them. I also hung out at the B-side a lot. My question is, how does a women's leadership initiative, how does a board like the Playboy series that so blatantly objectifies women get past a women's leadership initiative?
You know, that's a really good question. I really don't mind taking it. When I told you that when I first looked at things, I realized that culture couldn't be dictated from top. And I remember when I first started it, people were like, oh, you know, Donna's going to be the police of it or whatever. So I decided very early on to take that out of my hands and to put together a RAT committee. It's called the Risk Assessment Team. We have a couple members, 3 members here of the Risk Assessment Team. And we take a look at anything that has to do with weapons, sex, or drugs. That's sort of our, you know, and we have to ask ourselves, is it okay, is it not okay? For example, a couple years ago, we went to a 0 tolerance on guns, and we had photographers. I remember we had to stop production of a jacket that had a photograph of a gun inside because we had decided, and it was a beautiful photograph and all that, and we decided no tolerance there. On the Playboy stuff, I have to tell you, it's like they are from 1967. One of the women who was on the board came to our store in LA. She's in her 70s now. It was kitschy. It was a celebration of Playboy. I actually think that Playboy did something for this culture. I really do. I think that in the 1950s, nobody was willing to talk about sex or look at sex or whatever. And you know, and then we did another release when they decided to go to no nudity. So they were making a statement that they were going to no nudity. So we really looked at these boards and we said they're kitschy, they don't show anything specific, we think they're fun, but we also said we don't think that a mom buying a snowboard for her kid is going to want to see it, so we put them into black bags. As you know, we had a protest and everything else. I remember one of the protesters came in and bought 3 of the boards because she knew they were going to go for a lot of money on eBay. It's like the people coming off Planned Parenthood to have an abortion or whatever. But it was a judgment call that we made, and we have to make it. And if you look at other snowboard companies, if I look at what Capita puts on a snowboard, are you kidding me? Like, no one talks about that, but it is really objectifying. And we were never going to be that skateboard company who just objectified women or had women in bikinis at their trade shows. I swear to God, they used to do that all the time. We would never do that. But we made a decision as a group of senior team that we were okay with that graphic. And quite frankly, it didn't cause a problem anywhere except Vermont. No, I'm really not kidding about that. It's like in Japan, they had them in the window, you know, and there was no, in California, they don't give a damn. Somehow they give a damn in Vermont. And I feel bad about that or whatever, but I wouldn't change the decision. I was comfortable with both the process and the artwork.
Yep, agree.
Hey, so it's so great and inspiring to see you all here. I wanted to ask, since Burton has had such an incredible influence in the outdoor industry across the board, have you seen the influence of what you've been doing around promoting women's leadership go outside of Burton? So you've talked so eloquently about what's happened internally, but you know, have you seen that influencing other competitors or your vendors or, you know, across the board outside of Burton specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's an organization which Elysa was on the board for a long time, and I'm now on the board, called Camper Outdoors. And they started as the Outdoor Industry Women's Council, and they started about the same time I started my initiative. I feel like we kind of grew up together. So they do provide, for example, mentoring within the outdoor industry, and I think a couple of you have participated, so sort of cross-company mentoring. They do a recognition and so forth. So we've been working, yes, very good. I think we're one of their biggest financial partners. In terms of, it's sort of us, Patagonia, Arc'teryx, and REI are kind of driving that. So look that up, Camber Outdoors. And the other thing we do is like networking events, where we do Camber, any outdoor company is invited to send their women to our networking events. So that's a good question, because you can't do it alone. You
I
need
had,
to make systemic change.
I had one experience, but I know, Donna, you've done this about 50 times. I was invited back to speak at the bike industry about everything I learned after leaving the bike industry and coming into snow. And it was an opportunity to talk about everything Burton has done for women. And I had a line after of people wanting more information. Tell me more about your policies. Tell me more about, like, the mentorship. How does this work? I had literally a string of at least 12 emails the week after to follow up on people wanting more information. I've connected HR directors at, Trek Bicycles with our Burton's HR, because they're trying to put these policies in. And that was just from one speaking, and you speak all the time to different groups. So
No, I get a
what
few
Burton's
calls
done
a
has
year
gone out.
from CEOs going, oh, shit.
How
A
did you
woman
do
just
it?
left
Like,
my senior team, and I realize now I only have 1 out of 13. What do I do? And it's like, okay, get ready. It's a long process. It's a lot of work, but yeah. So I think we have become a model for the outdoor industry, and we work closely with Camber to kind of tell that story. And
I also think, just to add to that, is what Burton's done a great job of, is that we've been very transparent with what we've done. Like, it hasn't been like, oh, let's keep this as a competitive advantage, which is certainly some of it, but just sharing that. So we are full disclosure. You want to know the whole story? Do you want to know the research that we found, or what we decided were the key programs that we wanted to build upon? So we've looked at it as a way to just sort of lead the industry, in our own endemic space and out, to just say, hey, that's the right thing to do, people. Like, we're not trying to kind of hide this. And I think that's really served us well. And, Donna and I had this tagline we came up with a number of years ago, that we wanted to be the employer of choice and brand of choice for women. And that was a very powerful moment, I think, for us, when we realized, that's, when you think of it that way, we want to be as committed to kind of our business and our commerce as we are to the women that are in-house and what they're doing, and attract more women through that. So that's been successful for us.
I don't know if I need a microphone.
Oh, sure. This is for Vermonters.
Oh, cool. Thank you. All right. First of all, Donna, you had me at oh shit. Love you guys. It's been really inspiring evening. As a native Vermont woman-owned business, I'm the president of a cannabis company here. And I wanted to kind of have you speak to the side of marketing through social media. I'm also a mother of 2, and it's hard for me. I've been advised, I post a lot about cannabis, and I get maybe, 100, 200 hits. I say something personally about my, husband or my children, and I get 1,000 likes. Nothing to do with cannabis. So where do you draw the line, or is there a line? I certainly want to engage and show that transparency, as you had mentioned about, our culture and me as a business owner. But is there a line? Where is that line using social media with your personal side versus, your actual point of sale, who you're trying to reach?
Yeah, I'm going to defer to marketing here, but I think it's a really interesting question. I remember when 7 years ago or something, we instituted a internal kind of Facebook where people could post about what they're doing, and we all sat there and go, you mean they can like what I say or not like what I say, and they can do it anonymously? And this stuff is weird to our generation, And I think social media was one of those things like gender diversity, where we found ourselves a little behind the curve, and then we ramped up and became leaders. So I'll let you. We have there's no line between work and play at Burton, or there's not a very defined line. We're all friends. We all work hard, play hard together. So our sort of lives are our business and vice versa. But
Yeah, I think every company is having this discussion right now. What I'd say is, like, there kind of are no rules for sure, but also you have to sort of decide what your success metrics are. So if you say, oh, is 1,000 likes, is that what we were going for? And I think that's where you have to be careful, because you don't want your brand to start getting defined by that response, because you kind of can't count on it. It can be the moment, it can be a moment in time, you could just hit on something that's a trendy or an emotional day. So I think what we try to be careful of is be true to the brand first, and I think that's something Jake has always taught me. If you put the brand first, kind of, and the sport first, kind of the rest will follow. So be true to the brand of what you say you're owning a cannabis company. I think you have to make sure you're defining the brand and being true to the brand, so people can feel like your voice is authentic and you're not just promoting something you're not. So when you do a personal post, that's great. That's what we are learning, is show a wider look behind the scenes into your brand, because that is the last connection. I think people come to you because maybe you have a best-in-class product and maybe you have a great history and heritage story, which is certainly our case. But what we're learning now is we need to have that one more step that gets them into the brand, which is, and who are you as humans? But you have to just be careful not to sort of completely soften your brand, because that's, of course, it has that emotional connection.
And we'll get hate. When I paid for women to go to the March on Washington, we got some nasty comments. I would say that overwhelmingly our customers supported us, and, we got good attention from it, but you had those people out there that were on there hating us on it. I made Breitbart as one of those people who paid for the protesters. So, yeah. And so you've just got to be willing to, and we've taken a very strong stance on climate change, and every time we do something, we'll get a little pushback from people or whatever, but you just kind of, like Emery said, if you're being true to who you are and who the brand is, then just do what you're doing. I did. I chimed up on a gun control thing, on a Burton thing, and all of a sudden I just let loose this thing, and I thought, oh, these people come to the snowboard platform for snowboarding, and I'm getting into it with some of our fans on gun control, yeah, so you learn, you kind of learn when to back off.
Understand where your
forth.
brand lives, within a space where nothing is sort of off the table.
Thanks, ladies. This has been super inspiring. My question is whether you obviously have a supporting environment, it sounds like, at Burton and throughout the years that you've been there. I was curious if you've ever felt like you've had to adjust your behavior, your communication style, your reaction to maybe what you would normally do in situations where you've been, in senior meetings, to be sort of taken as seriously as maybe your male colleagues, or kind of seen as being equals in senior management situations?
Never. Straight up. I just think I've never faced that. When people say, "What's it like to be a woman?" I'm like, I don't know, but it's just Burton is just Burton, and your talent and your drive and your kind of commitment to lean in is what propels you forward. It's never been about that. And I get asked that question a lot, and I always say, honestly, never. It's never been an issue, which I think is an incredible testament to what these guys have built. I don't know if you guys feel
You
differently.
know, I would go back to the international side of things. So when we go to Asia, we meet with a variety of different businesses. So whether they're suppliers or service providers or, you know, law firms, whatever it may be that we're meeting there, there is a different expectation as a woman in Asia. There's a different expectation in Europe. So yeah, I've changed my tact from time to time. We have a woman on the board who worked for a large Japanese cosmetic company, and she tells stories, I'm sure, Elysa, you could tell some too, that are just amazing about how she had to strategically plan for a discussion or a meeting there. So, yeah, you have to be culturally sensitive and aware, but you still want to get your job done.
That's true, especially in Japan. You are the only woman at the table, and it's unusual. Like, you feel it, like, you know, it doesn't happen here. So,
And I would add that it's goes both ways. The heat is the same, right? Sometimes you're kind of like, I wish, like, I'm a woman. Come on, come on, Jake. Because of me. But at the end of the day, the heat. It's just it's like, you know, it's not a soft culture. It's definitely, there's pressure and intensity, and it's gender fair.
I think we have time for one more. All right, fine. Twist my
I had
arm.
the pleasure of meeting the folks over at Chill, and congratulations for your foundation and the establishment of philanthropy. My question is, how do you make your decisions on what kind of philanthropic efforts to make into your direct community, as well as to your international communities?
yeah, that's a good question. So we started Chill 20 years ago, I want to say, and we were, you know, in the very beginning, we had everything pledged to the bank, and we weren't making any money or whatever, and we thought about what we would do when the day came we could give back. And we thought about various things, but it really was sort of teenagers who took a risk on us in the beginning. You couldn't go get a lesson. You couldn't, you know, you bought this thing and put it together and went up and hiked up, and basically it was teenagers who took that risk on us. So we said we want to give back to that. And quite frankly, you know, I think that it's hard as a company, like, you get asked for a lot of local community money, and you say, okay, I can give a little here, a little here, a little here, and you don't feel like you're really having an impact. Chill, we really feel like we're having an impact, and we're now in, you know, it went from kind of a Learn to Ride program for underprivileged kids in Burlington to a youth development program that's in 15 cities, and it's also in Europe. And it's also in Japan. We help the kids after the tsunami. We're in that area of northern Japan for that. So that's really how we thought about it, and you know, maximize the impact that we can have through snowboarding. So it's really, you know, it's really a youth development program that uses snowboarding and skateboarding and paddleboarding as a vehicle. One
Last
más?
one? Oh, no. One right here.
I'll close it out. I'm a former employee of Burton Snowboards, and I just want to say the culture that Burton has is completely amazing, and, you know, people that have worked there, that are no longer there, are still a family, and every time I go in the building, I feel like I'm home. So I just want to thank you for that, because I think that says a lot about Burton as a company.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, I say that. Yeah.
Dave, I swear I'm this close.
Just speaking of the global brand that you've built from Vermont, what makes this part of New England and Vermont easily leverageable? Or how do you see Vermont as strategic still to your brand for people who are entrepreneurs or growing new brands?
Such a good question. Good call.
Does anybody want to take the Vermont in our DNA kind of?
You're the best person.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, Vermont's always been part of our DNA, and if you go into any store of ours around the world, you feel a little bit like you're in Vermont. You know, there's wood and there's maple syrup and there's things. So I would say it's, we're very lucky to have such a defined sense of place. And I think a lot of it is, of course, the mountains and the mountains we love. But also the values of community, you know, that's really important to us. Quite frankly, you do pay higher taxes as a business, and they should name a few bridges after us that our taxes have paid. And we don't hide our goddamn taxes in Dublin or the Canary Islands. We really don't. We pay our fair share.
The only thing I'd add to that is when you talk about leveraging it, is what I love about it is that it's the authentic part of the story. It's just where it happened, because Jake and Donna are from New York, and this is where they came and, you know, kind of had their ski culture. So then it made natural sense for when Jake was getting started to, well, Vermont is my mountain kind of home, to do it there. So what I love about it when we talk about it is that's really where it started. It isn't just like, oh, they settled in Vermont and we kind of, you know, leverage that. It's truly, truly the story. And I think in a world right now where it is all about storytelling and it is all about heritage plays and people want something that has real meaning, and so that's the part I think that we have leverage, but we have an opportunity to do even more. So I think you'll hear even more from that, about that from us.
I remember also at the time Vermont had these cottage industry laws, which allowed you to have employees in your home. I think a lot of hat makers did it or whatever. I think we were breaking all the rules when we had like 6 people and we're dipping shit in urethane and the smell is going or whatever. But they sort of promoted these cottage industries, which I think helped us. The state also bought the building that we're in now 20 years ago and said, we'll lease it back to you. We just bought it for $1. Yeah. So they basically financed it for us. So the state of Vermont has actually has been good to us.
Awesome. If I can add one negative, it would be very few direct flights. I think we can all attest to that on this panel.
Although we used to be in Manchester, and that was real. You had to drive to Albany, and so I mean, only 1/3 of our business is in the U.S. So it's really global. So we do have to get on planes.
All right, well, we'll get you guys some more direct flights. It's the least we can do. We can do that, right, Dave?
Thank you.
Denver would be great.
Awesome. Please give our speakers a hand for sharing their time with us.